Next on the agenda is public comment. First is Heidi Matthews.
Good morning, board members. This is Dr. Sarah Jones with the Utah Education Association. Unfortunately, Heidi was not able to be here this morning, so she asked me to step in instead. This afternoon, the board will be considering legislative priorities, including your budget request for the 2021 legislative session. As part of your backup documents, you'll see that the UEA has put forward our budget priorities for the 2021 legislative session. We've seen how effective it is when the education community is united in policy and funding requests, and we can look at the outcome of Amendment G as a really timely example of that. But we know that Amendment G is not a complete solution to all of Utah education funding needs. This year has laid bare so many needs and inequities in our schools, and our educators have just made Herculean efforts to meet the learning needs of every student. And so we must continue to increase supports so that education is sustainable in Utah. So again, the document is in your is available for you to see online. A few items of note as you think about your discussion this afternoon from our budget requests for the year. One is recognizing the need for some one-time funds to deal with COVID-related expenses that schools have been facing. Another, which the board has been talking about quite a bit, is enrollment fluctuations and making sure schools are held harmless for any enrollment fluctuations due to COVID in their funding, and reinstating some of the critical funding that was unfortunately cut last spring due to COVID, such as reinstating the 6% or the remainder of the 6% WPU increase that was agreed to in March 2020, and the most funding and administrative cost factors and some other critical needs. And then continuing to work towards increasing the WPU. Our request this year is a 4% increase on the WPU. It will no doubt be an unusual legislative session, and we look forward to working with our state board partners on both policy and funding requests coming up. Thank you very much.
Next is David Mortensen.
Good morning, board members. This is David Mortensen, and I appreciate the opportunity of addressing you just briefly this morning. I'm an attorney with Stoll Reeves, and I represent American Preparatory Academy. In the room I have with me today, the chair of APA's board, Dee Henderson, and the executive director of the APA, Carolyn Charette. If all goes according to plan, a little later today, around 1:30, the board will be addressing a recent audit conducted on APA's use of special education funds. We're here today because we're not certain what the meaning of the action item on the board's agenda is, and wanted to just provide some comments before that's discussed. As the board is likely aware, for over a year, APA has been working with the staff and the board to address issues raised about APA's special education usage of funds. We've reviewed the recent audit. We've provided a response to that audit. We understand that the auditors have provided a reply to the response that we provided, and we have requested a copy of that but haven't received it yet. With the information we have, we understand the following. For 18 years, APA has operated an innovative, integrated special education program designed to provide special education services without separating students, special education students, from their peers. Legally speaking, that program complies with federal and state laws. Indeed, the focus of the program is consistent with the federal requirement that students be provided their special education services in the least restrictive environment. To do so, APA uses a number of licensed special education teachers and trained paraeducation special education teachers to assist those students while they learn in classes, often alongside their non-disabled peers. APA parents and students love this program because it allows their students to avoid the stigma of being pulled out of classes, but still getting the special education requirements of their IEPs. And this program has been successful. For 18 years, APA has received very high marks for its special education program, and its students consistently perform very, very well on standardized tests. Last year, after over 17 years of operating this program, some issues arose, and APA has been working tirelessly to resolve those concerns. Recently, it participated in the audit, meeting with the auditors and providing the requested information. And that audit that will be addressed later today reached a number of conclusions. First, I want to be clear. The auditors did not find any misappropriated funds. To the contrary, every penny of the funds were spent on legitimate education expenses. The biggest issue raised by the auditors was whether APA had properly paid certain paraeducator salaries with special education funds. To be clear, those paraeducators are supplemental employees hired specifically to provide, teach, and meet the special education services for students in their IEPs. Thus, we believe those funds were properly expended.
That's time.
I will say I'm going to use just a little bit, if I can, of Carolyn and Dee Henderson's time, and then they will be much briefer if that's okay. Let me just very quickly then conclude. As you address these concerns today, I hope you'll keep in mind, as you address the audit today, I hope you'll just keep in mind three things. First is that the cause of the concerns raised by the auditors. The number one cause raised by the auditors in their report is the cause of the concerns is this. The number one cause is complex special education regulations that required clear guidance in several areas, e.g. documentation, permissive use of funds, excess cost paraeducators. The number one cause of the concerns addressed by the auditors was the lack of clear guidance in the special education rules and regulations. We hope that before the board decides whether to require repayment of any funds, that it will consider whether it was important to give clear guidance to these schools who have been following in this program for 17 years before requiring repayment. The second point I hope you'll consider is that APA has a sincere desire to comply. We simply seek instruction and guidance on how to comply. And if we're given that guidance, we will comply completely. And we just need that clear guidance. And the third thing we hope you'll consider is whether it's appropriate to require repayment of expended funds that were spent on legitimate education expenses. Doing so will only serve to harm the students at APA. It won't actually bring any money back. It will only take money away from the students who are currently receiving their education at APA. The money was spent appropriately. APA's run a program that has been outstanding for many, many years, and we're committed to doing what's right and to complying with the law. And we hope that this board will review those things and consider whether, in light of those things, it makes sense to require repayment of any special education funds. With that, I'm going to turn the camera to Dee Henderson, the board chair.
Okay, next for public comment is Dee Henderson.
I'm the board chair of APA, and just in brief, charter schools were started to be innovative and creative in education solutions, and APA has done a great job in doing that. We've tried earnestly to adhere to state regs, policies, and to be compliant in every such way that we possibly can. I should note that historically, I used to be chairman of Liberty Academy, and learned full well the nightmares of compliance and the difficulty in adhering, and hired APA to manage the school, and subsequently ended up moving that school over to APA permanently, which is now APA Salem. And now I'm chairman at APA, and I just want you to know that our intent has always been to fully comply and have a best demonstrated program, and that collecting that those audit dollars back from us will only hurt our existing students. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Charette, our director, to summarize.
Hello.
She may want to.
Oh, you want to announce me first?
Next, we have Carolyn Charette. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carolyn Charette. I'm the executive director at American Preparatory Academies. And as a charter school leader in Utah for the last 18 years, I have worked to fulfill the charter mandate, which is to innovate new models of public schools, all the while remaining compliant with current laws and rules. This is a big challenge. You can imagine innovation and compliance together, being asked to change things and do things substantially different, but stay compliant with all the laws and rules is a challenge. And like I say, that's been my job for the last 18 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity I've had to do this work. But there can be challenges, and it looks today like we are seeing one of those challenges kind of come to its head. We feel we've been very successful in our special education program at our school. Our goal has been to have our students be in the least restrictive environment, meaning taught with their peers and not pulled out into small resource rooms or other classes. And the reason is because we feel passionately that students should not be stigmatized in special education. With Utah's record high rates of student anxiety, depression, and suicide attempts, we feel it's vitally important that stigma is removed from the special education experience. And as an innovator, we've been trying to do that through ensuring that our students are not stigmatized by being pulled out for special education services. Indeed, making our special education program as invisible as possible has been one of our innovative goals. And we feel we've been very successful because our parents love this program. They seek out our special education program, enroll their kids with our school so that they can avoid that stigma. Our students have also been very successful, consistently performing above the state average academically when compared with other special education students across the state. So on those two levels, our parent satisfaction, our student performance, and not stigmatizing our kids and fulfilling that innovation goal, we have, it appears in the last year now, run into some challenges with regard to the state rules. We are fully compliant with IDEA, and I think that's the gold standard. The auditors, I'd like to just take a second and say thank you. We have loved working with Debbie Davis and Kevin John. It has been a phenomenal experience. They are professional. They are smart. They have come into our school for 8 months, had great conversations with us, and given us insights on how we can be even more compliant across many areas. We really appreciate their work and feel like it's been a great collaboration. The one thing I'd like to point out is we appreciate, especially in their report, noting that the state rules are unclear and have not kept up with innovation. They don't really address a program like ours. And we would love to continue to work with the state staff to see those rules become more flexible so that we can innovate in special education and continue to bring this program to our families and our parents. Another important point is we are monitored annually by the USB special ed staff, and we've received strong scores there every year as well. So we are committed to compliance, but we're also passionately committed to our students and our innovative program, and appreciate the board for all of your hard work, for your service, and for your consideration of this issue. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our public comment portion of our meeting. Next, we'll move into our Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind portion of our meeting. We will begin with item 3.1, which is our fiscal year 21 monthly budget report. Carl Empey, the finance director, is here with us.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, and board members. As you mentioned, the financial report is for the 3 months ended September 30th. We are financially solvent. We've had state transfers or inflows coming in for the 3 months of $9.4 million. We have expenditures of $6.7 million. So we've had more inflows than we did expenses by the amount of $2.7 million. The first item, is the enrichment fund project. And let me just talk about that. Of the projects you approved back in April, they were $1,084,000. We have spent approximately $143,000 year to date, leaving us a balance of roughly $942,000. One item I want to bring to your attention that will be relevant to our item number 2, the action item for use of enrichment funds that Associate Superintendent Michelle Tanner will talk about, is when we closed out the books as of June 30th, we found that we've got a surplus balance of the Land Grant Trust Fund, or the Enrichment Fund, of just in excess of $1.3 million. So over the past few years, we've been receiving more money from the Land Grant Trust Fund than what we've been able to spend. And so we're going to be proposing to you a way to use some of that $1.3 million in just a few minutes. So going back to the budget report for the 3 months, we're financially solvent, as I mentioned. We had excess transfers over our expenditures by $2.6 million. The number of students that we served is $1,625. The balance in the Land Grant Enrichment Fund is $1,164,000, and our donated fund balance is approximately $245,000. One item just to bring to your attention: in the past, in donated funds, we had approximately about $1.2 million. As of the 1st of July, or the first of the new fiscal year, we separated out our education foundation balance, and that is $1,070,000. So between the Education Foundation report and the donated fund balance, that's approximately what you've seen in past financial reports that we have presented. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have on either the enrichment fund spending and projects that we've had, or the financial report as of the first 3 months.
Are there any questions from board members? Board Member Cannon.
Yes, so just to be clear, did I understand correctly when you said that all of those enrichment funds come from money that you get from your land grant trust lands?
That is correct, Board Member Cannon. That is the annual revenue. It's about $900,000 a year that we receive, that we're able to bless the lives of our children, or students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Board Member Hanson.
Thanks. So that land grant money, the enrichment funds, are those restricted funds? Are we able to use those for any purpose, or are there any strings attached?
They are, Board Member Hanson, they are restricted. They're only for the benefit of enriching the lives of our students. So that's why we always go to the advisory council in the fall, and then, or in the early spring, and then bring those projects to you that we've reviewed and discussed that will benefit the lives of our students.
So just quick follow-up, does that mean it needs to be a capital type expenditure, or could this be for ongoing needs?
It can be used for program needs. We don't use it for capital projects whatsoever.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Board Member Cannon and Hanson, your hands are still up. Do you still have a comment for this? No. Okay, thank you. You can continue, Mr. Empey.
Okay, I'm going to turn the balance of the time now over to Associate Superintendent Michelle Tanner to talk about the proposed uses of the balance that we have in the enrichment fund.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Michelle.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I want to talk about three things. The first one I'm going to start with is the proposal for the online content creation. So obviously this past year has been an intense focus on providing education and services to our students in an online or virtual format. prior to that, we had been working extensively to become the first school that presents and puts online content for deaf and hard of hearing students. So there are many online schools that do a phenomenal job, and it's difficult for our students because those courses are not completely accessible to our students. So we had been working towards that, been doing high school online content creation. We have several classes that are for high school students. However, when COVID hit and we did a focus on that, we felt a real urgency to get online content created for our elementary age students. As you probably all aware or seen experiencing, children go out, they'll be quarantined for 2 weeks. We have some students that through this pandemic have decided that maybe they'd rather homeschool, but they really still want our support and they want direct access to the School for the Deaf. We've even had some schools reach out to us. Their students, they're offering an interpreter, which we provide to them, to provide an interpreter for those students who have gone remotely in a district program. And yet they've reached out to us and said, yeah, remotely my child needs direct instruction from the School for the Deaf. So I kind of need to change things up a bit. So with all these things going in line, and our teachers at school, we have also prepped them to be ready at a moment's notice to go right online. And in order to facilitate all that, it's created this need for online content creation for our elementary grade levels. One of the things we proposed was that we would have our educators, we started with, maybe I'd hire 2 educators that would teach online content for the elementary grade levels. Well, it's pretty expansive and pretty difficult because you're only going to have small classes in each one of those grade levels. Plus, to develop that content is extremely heavy lift. It's not just getting content together, it's actually creating it in an accessible format in both a spoken format, a written format, and of course, American Sign Language. So it's an extensive lift. So what we said that's not going to work. What we could do is we will have a opportunity for our teachers to create the online content for that grade level. So for example, kindergarten content, the teacher would create all the language arts content in alignment with the Utah Core Standards. So that's reading, it's reading, shared reading, guided reading, reading aloud, it's spelling, it's English grammar. Then we have math, and of course, aligning with the content with all the math standards for that grade level, and then science and social studies. And we would ask and offer as a way of doing that an incentive to the teachers because they're already doing content for their classrooms. The benefit for the teacher is obviously the incentive of the stipend amount, but also that they could also be developing these tools that we can utilize here at the school for other grades, but also they could be utilizing it in their classroom. So we put it on an LMS. We're planning on using Seesaw since it's younger children. And we've already had such a great liftoff. We have IT has prepared all the shared drive folders. We also have our staff has coordinated how we can pay out these contracts so that we have a visual representation of how that will happen. And we put it out to the teachers to see who's interested, and they are all very interested. And in fact, and some I talked to said, this will alleviate some of the stress I'm feeling right now dealing with COVID. It gives me hope that I won't have to keep creating my content, developing new content all the time for online format. So that is the amount here. We're wanting to offer $30,000 for kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And then we need specialists specifically focused on the ASL for the younger children, because it's very different teaching ASL to a child who is deaf as opposed to, say, they're an adult or high school student who's learning ASL as a second language. There's some developmental milestones. So that is the ask for that. We've ran this through the advisory council. They were highly supportive of the need. They recommended that we have people work together, which we have in some cases, in kindergarten, third, and I believe fifth. They wanted to collaborate. And in that case, they would split the amount and they'd each get $15,000 each to work together. The goal is that this be completed by June 30th. So we are up and running on the first day of school for next year. and they'll be working on it through this year and be meeting with them monthly. We'll be meeting with monthly in PLCs and to make sure individually to see that they're getting their needs. We have a mentor who we've assigned in from previous enrichment monies as an ASL coordinator. He knows how to make these so that they're professional. He's a certified reviewer of online content. And he's deaf himself, so it makes it really helpful. That is the presentation for the online content creation. Does anyone have any questions?
Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cummins. Michelle, I have a couple of questions. Are we able to find employees that can do this, or are we going to have to go out of state maybe to find people to work on this?
That is a great question. I honestly considered going for people outside the school as well, but it turns out we have somebody interested in each of these grade levels, and in some cases they're two working together. They are very passionate and very. I had two requirements. They not only had to be a great teacher for that grade level, but they also needed to be someone who is tech savvy and able to navigate the different platforms that we have. And so far, every one of these we've got interested, in some cases two.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also I appreciate this whole concept and I know that you've been working on this over about the last 3 years because I've talked to Joel several times about it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you've been helpful too. We've been talking to Laura about some of the things we need to do to get things like this up off the ground.
Board Member Hanson.
Thanks. I was just wondering how we came up with the $30,000 figure. Have we looked at outside sources and seen what it would cost to do it outside, or how did we come up with that number?
Yeah, outside sources we'd have the cost of it hiring a full-time employee, and so that is roughly about $100,000 to hire somebody to fully do like just online content for kindergarten, online content for first grade. By splitting it out, working together, collaborative, and providing the mentoring support within the school, we were able to save a lot of money and bring it down to $30,000. That's where we came up to that amount, is to save it from actually hiring a full-time staff.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. If you want to move on to your next item.
Yes, thank you. The next item, I believe, let's see what someone did. Okay, there, audiology van and small bus. We'll start with the audiology van. Many years ago, I think it was about 7 years ago, we purchased an audiology van that we use regularly. We use it as we travel across the state and provide services to and a lot of things, even kids that we're not even sure are deaf or have a hearing loss yet. We provide screenings and things of that nature. We use it across southern Utah, central Utah, and it's getting a lot of mileage on it. It's getting to a point now that it's still got some use, and we're still plan on using it. And maybe it's not the kind of van you want to take on a long distance at this point, because it's needing more repairs, it's needing having more issues. And this is something that is very, very helpful to the entire state. I even had a conversation just Monday with the Department of Health. They have a small limited number of audiologists that can help out. The fact that we take on and do all the school-age children and provide it to those students who do not have an audiologist in those areas has been a tremendous help. So we need to replace this van. Its estimates are around $200,000. Is a customized van. It has to be, it's a unique van, only one at a time. And so it takes some money to get that taken care of. So that's the audiology van.
Are there any questions from board members? Board Member Hanson?
I just wondered, is the current van fully depreciated? And what year is the current van? How many miles are on it? What would the fair market value be for that van?
I don't know what the fair market value would be at this point. I do know that it is at 60,000 miles. Those are miles, by the way, through some harsh terrains that it's had to go through. Montezuma Creek, it goes through the reservation quite a bit. and it's about 7 years old. Those are great questions, Board Member Henson. I appreciate that.
These fleet vehicles belong to the state fleet, and they manage all of the business side of the vehicles.
Just to follow up, do we have quotations for the cost of the new van, or how did we estimate that?
Yes.
The amount?
Yes, we do. Yes, we've gotten 2 quotes right now that we're working on. They're hard to find people who make these kind of customized vehicles, so we have only 2 at this point, but they're all in the ballpark between 175 and 200.
Okay, Chair Huntsman. Chair Huntsman.
Yes, I'm a little slow on this unmute.
Sorry.
I'm back. Hey, maybe it's a question for Superintendent Coleman. Can you speak to the comments and support of the USDB advisory committee, please?
Yeah, when we have, in our last meeting, when we discussed the online content creation, we did a few things, just the same order that we went in during this meeting with you as a board. First of all, Carl relayed to them that because we have a good, consistent revenue from the deaf and the blind school trusts each year, and because we have not needed all of those funds each year, and also this last year because we spent even less of them due to school and a lot of our programs being preempted, we have additional one-time funds built up that we were supposed to kind of look for good uses for those. And then the next thing we did with the advisory council was we talked with them about it. They were very supportive of our suggestions and felt like those would be good uses of the money. They asked questions about it, for some similar ones to what you've asked. They also wanted to know with the audiology van, why is it necessary, and will we still deploy the older van, which we decided we would do just in a smaller, more of an urban area in southern Utah around Wasatch and Iron counties, and we would deploy the new van out in the more rural areas on the reservation and Blanding, Four Corners area, Monticello, and Moab, and those areas on the other side of the state. They wanted to know how long it would take to build the van, and it would take several months. It's essentially a mobile audiology lab. So if you've been in our buildings and seen the audiology booth, where you have the booth and then you have the professional audiologist with the equipment on the other side, it's that inside of a big RV. And so we're able to reach families that actually can't get to a stationary booth. They would have to come maybe to the Wasatch Front or other places. And for some of the families that we have, they don't travel very often from their rural areas. So those were the kinds of questions that they asked. And then they were supportive of the ideas of bringing these things to the board. So that's my report on the advisory council's input.
Do you have a follow-up question, Chair?
Oh, well, yes, I would like to make a motion if I could.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make the motion that the board approves the proposal for use of the USDB enrichment funds as presented. Then I'd like to speak to the motion.
The motion is that the board approve the proposals for the use of the USDB enrichment fund as presented. Is there a second?
This is Board Member Nielsen. I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion to that motion, Chair Huntsman?
Yes, I think it's a very innovative way to use the funds. I know that our advisory group there is very enthused about these 2 proposals, and I'm excited that the money will be staying within the state and that we'll be using our fantastic employees in making this happen. And so I'm very much in support, and I seek your support to move forward on the proposed motion.
Thank you. Board Member Belknap?
Yes, thank you. 2 points of clarification, please. One, Joel, did I understand that you're keeping the old van? Is it that in perpetuity, or is that just until the new van arrives?
No, it will be afterwards so that we can actually use it in the area in St. George and Cedar City, in that area, and maybe up to Richfield.
Okay, and then my next question, do we have any issues with this money that has been set aside for the use of students using it for a vehicle? I just wondered if that has been discussed.
That's a great question. That was one of our first questions. And when we went back and reviewed the use of enrichment funds, because it's directly used on students, then it qualifies. In fact, what we try to avoid is using this money for ongoing traditional school operations like buildings or personnel that are required for that type of thing. And so we use it for our short-term programs, for and these two, especially because this money is sort of becoming one-time leftover money, it's completely within the I guess guardrails of the enrichment funds.
Okay, I just wanted to say I've been in this audiology van in St. George, and it's really phenomenal. So thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Hanson? Sorry.
Yes. Just a question. We haven't heard the rationale for the small bus, and I don't think that we can vote on a motion without at least hearing the proposal on that.
That was what I was going to also bring up. Thank you, Board Member Hanson. There's just a little bit more.
Go ahead, Michelle.
If you scroll down a little bit, I just didn't want to make sure I didn't present everything, so that trying to pull a fast one here. There is a small bus that we're also including. We've got listed down here $75,000 for that bus. We've worked with Fleet for that. That small bus is to help with our enrichment after school activities. It gets students to their field trips. It gets students to their basketball games, away games. Oftentimes we've been using the great big bus. We have 2 great big buses. And sometimes it's like most of the time, it's like half that bus is filled. So, but we have more needs than a small van, but it's not necessarily a need of a big bus. We still use the big bus when we have large field trips, but this small bus would save the cost for gas, fuel. Plus we can also drive that. We often have troubles hiring a bus driver. That's extremely difficult. So the idea with the smaller bus is to be able to accommodate those smaller numbers and save some money on gas, save some money on hiring a bus driver. And that, by the way, that we did get a quote. I just want to be clear. We got a quote through Fleet that says it's $76,507. So that's the specific number. It's slightly over than $75,000 when they were originally giving me estimates. And that's my whole report. Thank you.
Board Member Hanson?
Thanks. Oh, there we go. And maybe this is a question for Carl. I just wondered if we'd done a cost benefit on this small bus. I understand that it looks like a waste to have a big bus with half the people in there. But there's also the fact that if we have a small bus and the big bus is just sitting there, now we've paid for 2 buses and we're not using that big bus like we were before. So have we looked into that? I understand we'd save some gas money on the small bus, but there's also the purchase price of the bus, the maintenance of that small bus, and I wonder how that all works out.
Well, there's another factor, Board Member Hanson. Sometimes both buses are being used for other activities, and so we've had to use a combination of multiple vans driving the athletes to their sports events, and so this will free that up, and we can keep our bus drivers utilized and not have to use staff to drive the vans. We've not yet completely done a cost analysis in terms of the large bus versus the smaller bus. But you're right, it will save on gas. Maintenance will be deferred on the bigger bus since we're not using that as much as well.
There's one other thing I'd like to mention too, I think to the good questions that Board Member Hanson is asking, and that is that
Superintendent
bus-
Coleman, sorry to interrupt. Just when you begin speaking, do you mind just introducing yourself since we're mostly virtual and people can't tell who's speaking? Thank
That's
you.
right. This is Superintendent Coleman again. The small bus does not require the use of a certified bus driver either. So when you drive these small groups of maybe 10 kids in a small bus like this, it's actually very difficult for us to pull them in when both of our bus drivers are deployed elsewhere, or if one is not available. And so it'll be much more handy that the coach can just drive the kids, for example, or something like that. That's a big logistical consideration. We've kind of batted this idea around for a couple of years now. And now that we have the money that's appropriate to use on this, we thought it would be a good time to execute the purchase.
Board Member Hanson, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see no further hands. So the motion before us is that the board approve the proposal for the use of the USDB enrichment funds as presented. Please vote.
This is Board Member Nielsen. I'm an aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Board Member Newell.
I can't find my icon, so I'm an aye.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, the motion appears to be unanimous. Just for clarification, Board Member Lear and Board Member Earl, are you an aye?
Yes, I raised my hand. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to clarify.
Yep.
Okay. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have approval of the fiscal year 2020 USDB fees. Carl Empey is going to introduce those.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The legislature requires the governing board to review and approve proposed fees for the upcoming year. So this chart that is on your agenda is our proposed fees. I think it's important to mention there's really just two fees that we have that we assess the students. One is a sport athletic fee, which is $100. Down the bottom right of your screen, you'll see the $100 fee. And then we've got a study abroad fee of $500. Now, we encourage the students to work on our campus to earn their credit towards those two respective fees, so they don't have the financial hardship of coming up with that money if they're not able to do. The other fees that are listed are what we charge other LEAs for providing the respective services to their students in their local school districts. And then we also have at the bottom just some room rental fees if they reserve and use our dormitory, our conference facilities, or multi-purpose facilities. So I'd be happy to answer, or any one of us on our team would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have in regards to these fees.
Are there any questions from board members? Board Member Cannon.
Yes, thank you. I would like you to explain to me what the educator conference attendance fee is and the parent conference attendance fee.
Michelle, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So when we hold or host a conference that we invite others, that we are the actual host, we are only allowed to charge the $100 a fee for them to attend our conference. Same thing with a parent. If we were to charge a fee for a parent to attend a conference that we are hosting, we could charge $25. We have not chosen to charge them $25 ever to a parent. We try our best to avoid charging conference attendees. We had a conference, I believe, last year, the ASL RT conference, in which we charged $100 for people. They came from out of state, not last year, 2 years ago. But that's not used very often either, but those are how they're used.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Earl.
Yeah, my question has to do with the educational interpreter. Is this when would that fee be used, or who would have need of using that fee? I'm just trying to. Is that just the fee that would need to be charged if a parent or child wanted tutoring or something, or needed help? I guess that's not really tutoring. That's why I'm trying to understand what the usage is there.
Would you like me to respond to that? I can respond to that. We use that when we are writing up contracts that we submit with districts that are the 3% districts. So if they are contracting with us to have an interpreter in the classroom for a student in their district, and they're one of the 3% districts, that's the cost for the educational interpreter. And that may also be for some of their after-school activities for a child, say in Canyons or Jordan School District, one of the larger school districts. Otherwise, we provide the educational interpreter to all the other charter schools, smaller districts, at no cost. I think that's...
Okay, that answered my question. I guess I was looking at its parental fees, not necessarily overall school fees. So thank you.
Yeah, we would not charge a parent that cost at all.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, this is an action item. Board Member Belknap. No? Okay. Yes, Board Member Belknap.
Sorry. I have one more question that I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
My question is about the fee for educators. Is that the same question that you just answered for Jenny, that this fee schedule is for overall educators and students? I don't understand that difference.
That is exactly the same thing. So sometimes we send a teacher of the deaf out to one of the, or a TVI actually, to one of the larger districts. And in that case, we write up a contract with them, and we include in the contract as part of our calculations how many hours they're needing our teacher, and also how many hours they'll need hours. It is hours. They're going to need our educational interpreter. So those are included in district contracts.
And I'm sorry, just for clarification, through the chair, vice chair, I want to go to Michelle. My question is, you've put down an educator's fee of $100. I still don't understand why that's a fee on here if it's for an educator when fee schedules are for students.
I
can answer that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks,
I can help answer that. Our fee schedule has to be approved by the legislature every year. And it has to include all of the fees that we charge anybody, whether it's students or other agencies. And so before we take it to the legislature in their session each year, we run it past the board at this time of year during the budget process. And it covers both requirements, that we approve student fees and any other fees on our fee schedule that the legislature approves.
Follow up, Vice Chair?
Yes.
So, Joel, I just wondering if there's another way to lay this out, just so we know that there's two different funnels there. And I know it's not going to be for today, but just future thought. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the fee schedule.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion before us is the board approve the USDBE fees for the fiscal year 2022 as proposed. Any discussion to that motion? Board Member Lear?
Yes, similar to Laura's previous comment, I can be okay about this for today, but I would like to see a separate fee schedule for, and I'm not trying to make work for USDB. Heaven knows you provide a wonderful service, but I'd like to see a fee schedule for USDB that looks like other LEA's fee schedules, that it applies to students and parents, and then whatever you need to do for the legislature could be separate from that. But I also find this confusing when you're mixing fees that you're charging LEAs and fees that you're charging students and parents. And I'd like to see those distinguished so that USDB looks like any other LEA for purposes of student fees.
We can certainly
Going
do that. That's great feedback. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. The motion before us is that the board approve the USDBE fees for FY 2022 as proposed. Please vote. Green check mark for yes. Red X for no. Okay, Board Member Nielsen.
I think I voted yes. Check it.
Oh,
See,
good.
I was able to find that little icon. I think I voted yes. I know I voted yes. I just wanted to see if Lorraine
Okay.
saw it or not.
Sorry, you're just way down. Okay, now I know where to look for you. Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
And sorry, Brittany, now I know why you asked before. I just raised my hand, but thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that motion passes. Next is the superintendent's report. Superintendent Joe Coleman.
Thank you. Let's see, I had it here. There it is. Okay, the first thing I wanted to comment on, we already covered. That was our online school progress, and actually we're quite excited about that. Mostly excited that our own teachers were willing and very motivated to do it. And we started reaching out to other states and different people, and when they stepped up, it's just the best outcome we could have hoped for. So that's really exciting to us. Second thing, I wanted to give you a brief update on COVID in our organization throughout the state. We are still just kind of plugging along the same way. We'll have a few quarantines here and there, and case counts are still 15 to 18 total since March, which is great that it's that low. Unfortunate for those who have had to be sick, but also right now I think we have a couple of classes in the blind school on our Salt Lake campus, or on one of our two campuses, that have actually been doing online learning for this past week and next week. They will be doing online, and then they'll be back because they had a case in one of the classes, and we had. Oh, and I was just informed by Superintendent Tanner that we also have one class in the deaf school right now as well. So that's just kind of rolling, and they'll go out and then come right back in as soon as they're authorized according to the health department guidelines. And so I guess, how would you describe that? As good as can be expected at this point. Very exciting. This last week we had as Superintendent Dixon mentioned, we had the Governor's Award of Excellence, and the Governor's Cabinet awarded that award to Susan Thomas for the Utah Schools for the Deaf and the Blind as our media specialist. I mean, our communications director. And of course, Todd Keith, who's her media specialist, is very helpful with everything, producing the great videos and so forth. But what was great was the description that they read. They had the statistics and the numbers, and her work has just been phenomenal. And so I wanted to share that with you, and that she was appropriately recognized. Unfortunate we couldn't be in the rotunda like we normally are on these events each year, but they did a very good job online. And that brings me to our next item, which is we've recently finished editing the video that we prepared for brand new board members, understanding that there will be several new board members soon. And we created that just to help a little ease them into this idea that, surprise, you're not only a member of the State Board of Education, you're also a member of the governing board for the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, which I know not many people anticipate. So Susan and Todd have been great at producing that, and that'll be a nice resource to help you and your new board members. Another item I wanted to catch you up on is that we've been working with the higher education community. I met recently with the education deans of all the schools. They invited me to their meeting at my request, and we had great feedback on this concern that we've had with licensing and getting our teachers fully qualified and so forth. One of the issues we've had is we just don't have capacity in the state to produce the number of teachers or the type of teachers that we need for some of our students. And so great feedback. And Superintendent Tanner, especially with the on the deaf school, the blind school, our needs are met very well by higher education for those who need training for the blind teachers of the visually impaired. But anyway, Superintendent Tanner met with UVU this week. They're very motivated, and that's a perfect place it's situated. And we're still hopeful that Utah State will improve its program and develop what we need. That remains to be seen. But if we had both of those as strongholds, and we also know the Western Governors is potentially interested. And so I'm just excited. After several years of kind of pushing and nudging, we're finally getting movement on that, and that will help us. There's so much remediation and training that has to happen now when we get people from certain programs that we're hoping to avoid that, and they can hit the ground running once they get into our school more often. And that's not to say our teachers aren't excellent. They do a great job, but it really matters to have good partners in higher ed. Also, the next, let's see. Oh, I guess that covers everything on my list for my superintendent's report. Unless you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on those items or anything else that comes to your mind at this point.
Superintendent, this is Carl Empey. You may want to mention the 3 business cases we are requesting from the legislature this year.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that, Carl. Thank you for the reminder. We've been told pretty consistently up until last week, there will be no business cases submitted this year because of budget constraints due to COVID and the economy. Just this last week, Carl was at meetings, and Phil Dean from the state said, actually, we're going to have some one-time money this year. And so we do want you to submit those kinds of business cases. And with the blessing of Scott Jones and your financial staff there, we are going to resubmit the 2 business cases we submitted last year that were approved and then pulled back after the economic challenges that the state had. And one of those was for a replacement of the modular building at Mill Creek Elementary in where we have 4 classes there. The other one was for, what was the second one that we submitted before, Carl?
USIMAC.
Oh, that's right. It was the final of a 3-year one-time amount of money for USIMAC to help them with their sustainability plan, and that was $500,000. And there's one that came up at the suggestion of our facilities director, Adam Michelson. He had just a brilliant idea. We've always known that the physical space for USIMAC is just limited, and we're trying to put them in little closets and different rooms around our campus in Ogden. But he said, honestly, if we could build an inexpensive warehouse structure on the back lot in Ogden, where we have a lot of land, a lot of space, he said they could move the warehouse functions out to that area, and then we could renovate the current warehouse, which is inside of our main campus in a nice area. We could renovate that and relocate our USIMAC operations to that spot and reclaim some space that was needed for our school programs and others. And so we just thought that was a tremendous solution from him. And so we'll be submitting that as a 3rd one-time business case. And the cost of that, including site prep and everything, is only about $300,000. So those will be the 3 business cases that come to you through the process as you're prioritizing things this year at the request of the state and with the blessing of your own staff there at USPE.
Thank you, Superintendent. Board Member Gravitt has a question or comment.
Hi, Superintendent Coleman. Thank you so much for your report. And it's so fun to hear about all the great things that are happening at USDB. You talked about the COVID numbers, and I'm just wondering, is there a place where that is made public? I know in my district, for example, we have a COVID dashboard that I like to keep up on as a teacher. And is there a place the public can go just and teachers can go to make sure, just to see what the numbers are?
Yes, so we looked at that originally, and we decided not to do that because of HIPAA and FERPA concerns that we had. Because our campuses are kind of spread out here and there, it's the same reason we have a challenge reporting some of our student outcomes publicly on assessments, because the N scores are so low that it would identify the individuals who have contracted COVID. So we haven't done that, but whenever we have a request for that information, we work directly with that individual and tell them as much as we can ethically at the time. If we were to publish those, then it would really expose who has different health issues. And our HR individual, a manager, recommended that to us. By the way, it's Dave Laycock, and he works in Michelle Watt's team there with you. He has been amazing at fielding daily issues and concerns and questions and walking people through this. I think some days it's all that he does. But anyway, that's a long answer to your short question, Board Member Gravitt, that we considered that at first, but it was recommended to us, and we concurred that we probably shouldn't publish all of those publicly because it would divulge too much personal, private information.
Oh, yeah. Can I have a follow-up on that, Brittany?
Yes.
Yeah. So just to help me understand, because I know we've talked in my district about those same concerns, like even just identifying by school. But so can you give me an example of how many employees plus students plus staff would be at one school, for example, just like numbers, like 300 or whatever?
Yeah, so we have about 300 students on all three of our campuses together. And so, but if we close down a classroom, for example, you have classes as large as 15 kids, but most of them are smaller and less than 10. And so if we have like 6 children in a classroom and one of them gets COVID, all of a sudden all the other families know, and they can communicate freely and they can instantly tell. Or if same thing with our adult staff, we don't want to divulge that either. And so that was the discussion. We went back and forth for about a week talking about that. And we thought, okay, unless the board instructs us to do differently, let's hold off. And if there is a need that comes forward later and it starts to become an issue, we can always revisit that.
Okay. Now, but a teacher or parents could request that information and just say, how many cases do you have at a certain school, et cetera, with that? So, okay.
Yes. We just didn't, we had the discussion originally because we received requests from the media. All of the school districts requested that. And we thought, it's better not to just divulge that publicly and be kind of forthcoming that way at the beginning. And let's just react individually to folks who have individual questions. So it's we can absolutely talk to parents or staff members when they have questions about that. We're happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Superintendent Coleman. Does that conclude your report?
That does conclude my report. Thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for your time today.